Senator McFedrin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honourable colleagues, I am grateful to be back to health following my third bout of COVID, which prevented me from participating in some recent important debates in this chamber. And I am grateful to Senator Lankin for her alert that this motion was coming today. And I thank Senator Bellemare for her invitation to discuss what, in my experience, is entrenched discrimination against unaffiliated senators, exacerbated in the rules adopted while I had to be absent. To Senator David Richards, with today's announcement, we welcome you to our little unaffiliated corner of the chamber.
Here, here.
Colleagues, you may recall that in the debate on the recent Senate rules changes, I asked Senator Plett a question about equality among all senators, and his assurance that I was equal put me in mind of the great philosopher Aristotle, who was not a fan of democracy and is quoted as writing, quote, "To be the same is to be entitled to the same. To be different is to be treated differently." And as an unaffiliated senator, I am different from you, Senator Plett, and I am treated differently. Based on conversations, it seems that many senators do not realize that the entirely closed system of internal governance in this place, in effect, precludes senators accessing their charter rights available to us outside this system. More on that in later speeches, but it can be a shock when a senator first learns of this reality. Soon after the Constitution Act 1982, with its entrenched Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, became the supreme law of this land, the Aristotelian notion of formal equality was dismissed by the Supreme Court of Canada. In Law Society versus Andrews, the court set a precedent by exposing hierarchy in the guise of equality as never before, dismissing the old theory of formal equality, much liked by Senator Plett and Aristotle, which in the words of esteemed Yale law professor Catherine A. McKinnon, quote, produces very little real social equality, but in fact serves to protect inequality. The recent rules debate exposed these contrasting interpretations of equality. Appearing before the Rules Committee, Senator Tanis once explained that, quote, the motion proposes a series of changes to the rules of the Senate aimed at providing equality to all groups in the Senate. The changes center around actions that up until now have been reserved for the government and the opposition and levels up the other groups by providing equal rights and responsibilities, end of quote. My Conservative colleagues made cogent points on their concerns and their contention in committee that the duty and function of the official opposition requires a privileged role apart from those held by other groups. Although I am hopeful that I will be able to address the Rules Committee should this motion succeed, today I wish to speak to all of you, my honourable colleagues, on equality of senators qua senators, rather than the equality of groups that bestow privilege only to senators in a caucus. A very different experience for a senator who stands alone, unaffiliated with any group. After more than 7 years in this place, I've lost count of the senators and officials who've opined that, quote, all senators are equal, quote. But the reality is far different. Unaffiliated senators are disadvantaged by sessional orders, leadership decisions, less access to resources, no group protections that diminish the ability of unaffiliated senators to exercise the same rights and privileges as other senators. The adopted changes put forward by the GRO further entrench group privileges, but do nothing to advance functional equality of unaffiliated senators vis-à-vis those with group affiliations. Please note, colleagues, the choice to sit without affiliation is as political, as thoughtful, and as deliberate as the choice made by others to join a caucus. When I left my caucus to sit without affiliation, I was aware I would be giving up obvious advantages that come with group membership. I was pretty much prepared for that. However, what I was unprepared for, and what I cannot accept, is that as an unaffiliated senator, I am expected to accept daily discrimination, to give up, in practice, my substantive equality as a senator. If there is sincere belief in substantive equality of senators that is more than lip service, then indeed this motion is an important opportunity to increase transparency, accountability, and fairness in this chamber. Senator Saint-Germain, the powerful leader of the largest Senate group who sits on the Rules Committee, indicated in this chamber that the purpose of moving the recent amended rules is to, quote, uphold respect for the principle of senatorial equality and, quote, to prevent there being two classes of senators in this chamber, end of quote, which she asserted is a fundamental principle of democracy. I wholeheartedly agree with her assertion on equality as a fundamental principle of democracy among senators. I regretfully and respectfully disagree, however, that those particular amendments prevent the creation of second-class citizens in this red chamber. The reality is that there already exist different classes of senators. In principle, all senators are equal under the rules. But the way Senate leaders have long implemented these rules has resulted in ongoing structural inequalities. And our recent rules updates, by not fully addressing them, only act to further entrench these disparities. As such, I am grateful to Senator Lankin and the GRO for moving this present motion centered on unaffiliated members of the Senate, and I am hopeful that it may bring needed scrutiny and constructive modernization that is noticeably absent from the rules recently adopted. I do not want to belabor what was a difficult, albeit necessary, debate over the recent rules changes. But to illustrate my point regarding the customary omission of unaffiliated member concerns, I hope it is helpful to provide some concrete examples. Thanking Senator Lankin for her examples, time allows me to share only two. One, the new rules increase the statement period to 18 minutes based on current Senate group proportionality. This was lauded as a move towards greater fairness and equality. However, it effaced me from the equation and does nothing to advance equality among all senators, further entrenching how unaffiliated senators are effectively shut out, necessitating direct appeals to the entirely discretionary application of a kind of noblesse oblige of group leaders to use our voices in this chamber. But Senate Rule 4-2.3 simply states, a senator making a statement shall be limited to one intervention of no more than 3 minutes. End of quote. The rules of the Senate say nothing regarding the distribution or allocation of these 18 minutes of statement time. The current division of statement slots between groups is the result of private leadership decisions for a particular notion of efficiency and group privilege. But you won't find this in the rules. I note that in the other place, provisions have been put in place for several years to entitle unaffiliated members one statement per every certain number of weeks. Such an accommodation is modest, proportional, and respects the principle of equality. Are Senate leaders and caucuses prepared to do this? I hope that the Rules Committee will consider such common sense, equitable proposals as part of their upcoming study. Barring such acknowledgement and action, Perhaps it would be more accurate for senators to refrain from the homily of equality of senators and limit themselves to the more accurate statement of equality of group senators. My second example is the de facto erasure of unaffiliated members because the new rules are predicated on the justification that, quote, this is an area in which recognized parliamentary groups should be part of the process, end of quote, that was used by the GRO in the briefing documents provided to senators. This repeated rationale for expanding powers and roles to caucus leaders can be found in sections 3-3, 9-5, 9-10, 12-3, 12-26, for example. This promotes expansion of group powers on the rationale of serving members, but ignores that unaffiliated senators have zero representation in the process unless, once again, leaders deign to exercise their version of noblesse oblige. As I consider this present motion, I am reminded of a statement made by Senator Wu, who was responding to the RPRD fifth report last October. Quote, there are those who would deny us the ability to fully exercise our equal rights as senators who are not part of the government. They would have us as second-class senators who are allowed, from time to time, to sit in the front of the bus, but only with their consent. The modest changes to the rules of the Senate and to the Parliament of Canada Act to date have been offered grudgingly and with the condescension of noblesse oblige, end of quote. Senator Wu was referring to perceived inequality among Senate groups and caucuses. His every word, however, is equally applicable to the functional disparity between unaffiliated and affiliated members. I was heartened by the strong words of honourable colleagues such as Senator Batters, who argued against the recent rules changes, partly because they did nothing for unaffiliated senators. Senator Batters sits on the Rules Committee, so I trust that she will bring to the committee that same energy and sincere defense of unaffiliated members' rights and privileges, and most importantly, access to resources for the full exercise of our senatorial rights. As I conclude, I ask you to hear me as if it was you, as if you chose to serve without affiliation as a principled and deliberate choice. Now ask yourself what kind of equality you would want for yourself in order to fulfill your promise to do your best to serve your region and to represent those who do not have privileged access to Parliament. As unaffiliated senators, we understand that intra-group agreements supplement and interpret Senate rules in a manner seen to enhance efficiency. We also recognize that proportionality is a reality. Honourable colleagues, we are not seeking special rights, only a genuinely equitable balance of opportunities and access so we can fulfill the oath we took to serve. Agreements that purposely or by consequence deny opportunity to unaffiliated members, or conversely by design restrict opportunities only to group members, cannot be viewed as equitable, nor as advancing independence. This is formal, not substantive equality. Is this a Senate that can honestly claim equality among all senators? Is this the Senate you want? Entrenching the new rules empowers groups and leaders with additional powers and places the new reality of multiple caucuses on a more equal footing in many respects regarding operational function and responsibility. But this leaves unaffiliated senators disadvantaged relative to their colleagues vis-a-vis accessing Senate services and information necessary to the functioning of their offices and the preparation to fulfill their chamber and committee obligations. Honourable colleagues, in the name of fairness and longer-term effectiveness, I ask you to examine more closely the direction in which we are going in this chamber. To ask if this inequality strengthens democracy and to examine why a perpetually inequitable House would be the Senate we want now and for the future. Thank you. Merci. Megwich.